this is a dream for me, coming true as well. I could pick this panel, and I thought, okay, which one will I take? This one, definitely. Because here we have the people where I believe they know best how to answer the question of adoption. Everything coded is just an invention. But if people use it, it's a real innovation. So how do we get more nodes? How do we get more developers, more businesses, more projects, and hopefully users into the network is the overall question, because there are so many wallets out there, but 99% are not used. And I think all of you are showing a part on how to get there. Bill, you are the educator. You are the one who's writing great stories. I have your book here. You know as well how to create participation. Polkadot is all about governance and inviting users in deciding as well. Sophia, you know how to overcome the prejudice in businesses that blockchains are too slow or they are just transparent. You know how to solve that. Piers, you want to make things easier. It's, yeah, no one knows really the performance of their Mac, but they know and love how to use it. And you, Fabian, you make NFTs and blockchains more easily, more attractive to use and overcome the disadvantages which have been as well, and I believe, in the, well, legacy in even, well, blockchains, and help as well push the boundaries and developments. So that's just one question for this panel. What's the recipe for successful adoption of blockchains? I just want to throw this question in. You take the mic and keep on and answer whatever comes to your mind.
We have the mic to pass? Oh, I don't have a mic. Oh, I have this mic. Okay.
Do we hear Fabian?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. I mean, it's a very broad question. So the question is, like, how to make things successful. I think the main problem is UX, really. Like, it's the user experience. There's so much interest in Web3. There's so many people who want to really, like, they would like to play around with, blockchains and apps and all this stuff. But what holds them back is that they feel scared of making mistakes. I mean, the stories are real, right? It's not made up. It's not a scary story to keep them out of the space. It is literally, tricky. You can lose it all. And I think when the UX is failing, that's when you like, ordinary people are not making the step, right? And that's when you don't have users.
Short show of hands. Who gets sweaty hands when they do a transaction or when you did your first transaction? Okay. Yeah. It's scary. Okay.
It's scary.
Yeah, I think that there is I think that there's also a need for the industry to sort of, I think a lot of people in tech can sometimes malign UX, UI as just the pretty bit on top of the technology. The technology is the important bit. And so we, as an industry, we seem to obsess around things like transactions per second numbers. We seem to obsess around things like degree of decentralization, or like the idea in which you are most closely following the philosophy. Now, all of those things matter, but they don't matter at the user level. They only matter at the level in which the industry is trying to work out its engineering compromises that are going to be made at any given level of the stack. But as a result, I don't think we try to make the industry appealing to people who care about user experience design. And so when you go to conferences, I went to ETH Denver earlier today, and it was hilarious because every single conference was talking about the difficulty of the user experience, but then no one was talking about how do we get designers into the space? How do we get people who are actually going to be creating these better user experiences? They would just talk about how do you create the technology enablement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but also the problem is, I think it needs a bridge gap, because if you come as a designer, like, you need to have the understanding of the technology. Sadly, without the understanding of the technology, like, you can make up the coolest flows, but they won't be possible. And that has been the case so far because we're all using EOAs, because it limits you to, like, literally, you can do very little with that. So smart contract-based accounts will solve the problem, because now you can be very creative of what kind of UX you can and want to build. And I totally agree. I mean, it has to be started by nerds. the first users of blockchain have been nerds and traders and early adopters, and the UX kind of like reflects that pretty well. I think we're coming now to a point, and that's what we are working on with universal profiles, to really give that foundation layer that this kind of real UX, UI can happen, that will make it, you can actually make it easier than Web 2. Because even Web 2 is a total hack. Like you have your account system on every website, another account. Every time a new password, that's not fun. Nobody wants to remember another password or create accounts over and over again. With Web 3, you can make things like scan a QR code, sign a message, log in. And login and registering is the same thing. There's no difference anymore.
I wonder, actually, I mean, when I think about businesses, they also don't have a nice UX. If I think about, SAP sort of CRM tools or whatever sort of is developed in the corporate world without an UX designer, there is no big sort of worries about that. People are trained and forced to use certain software. So is that UX issue as well in the corporate world happening, Sophia?
Yeah. Reflecting, enterprise software has had a terrible user experience for many decades. And the problem with designers exists in Web 2. I mean, normally, if you have a designer co-located with the engineering team is when you get the best outcome, because then the beautiful designs actually match to, the sprints engineers are working on, and, they actually drop the wireframes in time for people to code them up and use it. Sometimes you just end up sort of two ships passing in the night, and the designs don't get implemented. Actually, Fabian challenged us during the prep to say, this should be controversial. So I'm going to just take a little step back in your initial question when you said, you were asking about success. And I do think there's different definitions of success. And we're probably on the panel, there's different ideologies and philosophies, and those underpin how people invest their focus and their time and their energy in the space. So, one reflection, this from the early days, is that, I guess my philosophy is you need to meet people where they are and bring them into the future. But there's certainly people in the early days of the space that felt, more, it's like, hey, we're crypto anarchists. Like, all of that's going away, and we're just focusing on this brand new thing. And we don't need to deal with the existing systems. We don't need to integrate with them. We're just blowing that up. And, so my personal philosophy is, we need to buy a plane ticket. You need to, bring a family member to the hospital. Like you need to deal with money still in various forms. So it's a journey, and bringing people along that journey is, I think, what success is going to look like. But I'm curious what other people on the panel think success looks like.
May I just sort of pick up that? Because if you say, let's blow up the way sort of how the crypto anarchists have developing and sort of shaping.
That was in the early days, but I'm sure some people, there's still that philosophy in the space too.
Which of course sets a big
Without that space would exist in the first place.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, I think the crypto anarchy, that's the ideal, that's the direction, that's the vision, right? And the problem is also because a lot of the industries, different kind of industry, from like banking first and then IoT, and all of them, they had their little take on, now it's the fashion industry and others, they had the take on, hey, blockchain and what will be the use case for them. Mm-hmm. The problem is also, like, there is a lot of ideas of what you could do, but there's also the realistic world of what you can do. And it's not so much even UX, it's even also scalability. I mean, do I want to have every plane ticket on the blockchain? Absolutely not. Because that's just like, it's a waste of valuable blockchain resources, in my opinion. Because this is a system that allows for very interesting things to happen. And I think we should use it for what it is, and don't just replicate a system that pretty much works well already on a centralized system like
plane tickets suck. Like they don't work well, and I actually disagree with you. I think every plane ticket should be on the blockchain. Like
eventually, yes. Eventually,
I think that's absolutely like the concept of a shared database between applications in which you can have something that can become a tradable commodity. Plane tickets are a perfect example of that.
And yes, I agree with you. Yes, absolutely. Eventually, ideally, everything should be secured by blockchain-like systems, where
things
it's
you
totally
own,
user-owned.
identity, like
absolutely.
any of those things.
But at the same time, it's also a question of, like, we are here, and this is where we would like to go. What is the most valuable thing you could put right now, and it has the most effect on social change and interesting new possibilities, rather than just replicating what we have in the old and just cloning it into blockchain? Yep. Let's figure out the cool new stuff we could do with this new tech. And that's far more exciting, in my opinion, because it is a limited resource. It is a very premium, expensive resource, in fact. Let's do the things that matter, rather than putting likes on blockchains and things that don't need to be there right now.
One issue we have, of course, is of deciding on what we do in blockchain is the question of block space, and which makes things cheaper. And I want to include as well, Bill, don't be too polite and wait. So just interrupt whenever you I see you moving as well in the chair, so whenever you have an urge to say something, please jump in. And what do you think right now of the recipe of successful adoption?
Yeah, so for me, and I sort of touched upon this in my talk earlier, it's the philosophy and giving people that option, right? I don't think Web 2 is going anywhere. I think there should always be as I mentioned, there are trade-offs, and I think having the capability that you can decide to do things either as a user or as a developer in a Web 3 way, in a Web 2 way, in a Web 1 way, in a command line way, on your local computer entirely, right? This is what we're bringing to the table. We're bringing optionality. That's how I see my role. And I understand, my goal is to convince people that's a good thing. I'm an educator. I don't see it as, all right, we need to force people, every plane ticket needs to be on the blockchain. But, some airplane companies, whatever, will decide to do this, and I think that'll be a benefit, right? And then we would see the market. I see our goal, at least my goal, as to teach people, all right, what is the differences, what are the benefits of this, and hopefully to bring adoption, perhaps that's indirectly, might be a good way to say it.
Yeah.
Now, I
was going to piggyback on the airplane comment, and then just what's the most important thing to tackle now. So I like to think of things in terms of like Horizon 1, where we are now, Horizon 2, Horizon 3. So there's a lot of really great aspirational ideas and really impactful change when you look at the longer horizon. I mean, right now, actually, I was just on the plane reading like this Nature journal in the US, which publishes a lot of scientific research that's very credible. They had an article just saying we've reached a tipping point from a climate perspective. So there's all this data and graphs about in the next 20 years, like just irreversible change is going to happen. We're moving to the Anthropocene era, and there's just climate outcomes that we're not going to like. So if, in one of the previous panels, Siemens, SAP, and others were talking about just, using blockchain, the supply chain, carbon tracking, so being able to actually not double count, double spend when you're putting money towards achieving climate outcomes. Just using the tools we have today, if we can make an impact in the next 2 to 3 years, that might slow down one of these tipping points from being triggered. And maybe it's not the best user experience or the end state for Web3, how we're going to solve these problems, but there's an urgency to solving some of these sooner rather than later with what we've got today.
So I think I actually disagree. Not with you. Right. But I disagree. I would disagree with the idea that we shouldn't be fanatical about some things. I think we should be fanatical about the idea that public ledgers is where things should exist. And I think that we should be fanatical. We should also be opinionated about the way in which some things are built. Like, if you say this is a platform in which you can do anything, come here and let your imagination run wild, you are not giving any boundaries in which innovation can actually occur. The best innovation occurs when you give a framework in which innovation can occur in the first place. So first of all, we should always be like, stop making private blockchains. Stop trying to own parts of own parts of this supply chain. If you're trying to create something like the internet, it needs to be open, it needs to be permissionless, and it has to be decentralized, because you are trying to put the entire wealth, identity, and sovereignty of the people of the world onto a thing. You don't want that owned by corporations.
Well, first of all, I guess my statement about Horizons was more time-based and not how being fanatical or not. I mean, you could have core beliefs, but just sort of prioritizing what you're tackling. So maybe a little more pragmatic. But so let's say in the case that people have existing business relationships where they're already transacting and they see an opportunity, hey, within this network I operate in, we could really make a significant difference in our carbon emissions. Does it matter to you if that's a network that is not completely public and open to the whole world? I mean, it's a business relationship which today is being conducted. There's bilateral transactions that happen that JP Morgan's not going to open up their ledger to everyone, right? But there's banking that needs to happen to support the world systems. So, I mean, getting out of the carbon example. So this is maybe the more pragmatic
maybe if I can quickly add.
Yeah, sorry, I just had really strong opinions on this. So I was like holding myself back.
Opinions? Okay,
yeah.
join the club.
No, yeah, that I totally agree that we need to move toward this.
Yeah. It's a journey.
Right, but no, towards moving towards a public blockchain, putting more information out there and publicly verifiable, and that I agree also that a lot of companies are not going to be comfortable doing that. But I see this as
in the short term. I mean, longer term, the technology and options evolve.
I'm worried because this is going to sound almost like Marxist, but I see it as sort of a historical inevitability, right? That private blockchains, this idea, is sort of eventually a dead end.
I mean, I was saying earlier, already things have converged.
Yeah.
So there's a blended approach, and people are exiting some things to public settings where it makes sense, and then there's different tools for different tasks.
Yeah, and I mean, I just look back. I've been in the tech world for quite a while, and I see so many proprietary things have withered.
I mean, you guys have over 40 parachains, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's an example of more of a sort of an app chain, blended chain approach.
Yeah, I mean, some of them have their own sudo capabilities. But what we see, and what I see is given the option, right? And I keep talking about optionality between something that is totally public, totally verifiable, and something that is private or something in between. Eventually, the things that are public, I think those, again, there are trade-offs, but I think in most cases that's going to be where just naturally where people move to, because that's what they'll trust more than things that are partially private.
If I could add something to this, and I really I love this panel. We should have better more panels like this with these actual opinions clashing, and not just the same old. But I think for example, what I think is we have a tool here that enables to gamify human behavior. And when it's about any kind of challenges, climate challenge being man-made or not or whatever, I think I'm a bit critical of the whole carbon trading, because I don't think it makes sense to have now countries that are poor selling their carbon to countries that are rich, and how is that a good thing for Europe when then they now get extra stuff to pollute just because they took it away from Africa? I mean, I don't think that makes a lot of sense. But I think what we can do is, and I think that's why we need open permissionless networks and people having these decentralized profiles, because we can now incentivize people to do good. And you can literally organize a clean up the beach community that somehow will be rewarded in whatever. I think even money as we know it will go away, because what will happen is that you will have participation in DAOs, in communities and projects where you have brought good to these communities, and then there's some kind of form of a token or a reward or a badge or whatever you got, and that now gives you access and benefit in another community. There could be a living community that says, hey, here, if you have whatever, 1,000 clean up the beach tokens, you can stay for free in our housing for at least a month or so. So suddenly you can have different ways of exchange that are more barter-like, but automated, where these communities can engage. And I think that's far more brings far better human impact and behavioral impact than doing carbon trading markets.
Well,
Fabian, can I just?
The voluntary carbon markets do have some reverse or incentives that you don't want, but I do think more transparency. There's ways to do this where you're literally just lowering the emissions. You're not just trading them to pollute more, which I agree is a problem.
I mean, blending trees and so on.
Part of the visibility you can get through some of these techniques and approaches helps you realize some of the problems that exist in the current system. So, and moving more towards a Web3 approach in the spaces could actually help there.
Sorry. In the last 5 minutes, I just want to tackle one aspect which you just touched. It's about the incentives. Tokens are, of course, awesome to incentivize and pay in some ways as well human behavior. And that's of course something great. So Bitcoin and mining helped as well to create sort of this global network of miners because they were incentivized to grow the network. And I wonder, do we have to build and incentivize this kind of mercenary user who gets an airdrop and here token and there token, which is the current state sometimes, I believe. Everyone is hunting those airdrops. And especially wondering as well, how can we create an impactful narrative around that so that the story is pushing rather than sort of the wallet and the incentives around that?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Like the incentivization in human society, the majority of it is not financial. Yeah. The majority of it is reputation based. The majority of it is
which is also tokenizable.
Recognition and so, like self-actualization, like things that you want to do because you care about your education, you care about furtherment, you care about betterment of others, you care about supporting people. But what this technology does, especially when you start creating the concept of abstraction of accounts, the concept of personas, you are able to take these things with you between communities. This is another reason that public ledgers is so important, because you have users in common. You have this ability to move things between. I can move my identity between places, and what that identity represents, not just in terms of my monetary representation, which is the lowest and easiest way in which blockchain has been doing things so far. It's like, oh, how do we get users? Oh, we pay them. It's so stupid, right? But the opportunity for creating incentivized systems, and I think we're both talking about the same thing when we say incentives. We're not talking about money, really.
No, absolutely, yeah.
We're talking about all of the other things that makes being a human fun in person and online, which is a sense of community. I
think what has been missing in the blockchain space is this identifiability. I mean, I know because this came out of Bitcoin and the hardcore belief about total privacy for everybody, and I agree with that. We should have that. That's why you can create profiles and make up whatever picture you want, the name you want, or add no name and picture. But at the same time, when you create identifiable people, and again, there doesn't need to be a real persona. It can be, you could be Mickey Mouse if you want to. If you make people identifiable, then these interesting social things start to happen. When you have a DAO and you see the members and you recognize, hey, this is the guy that's also in this DAO and in that DAO, you can't right now do this in blockchain as we know it, because it's a bunch of gibberish accounts. And then there's ENS addresses that can change the underlying account, so you constantly lose track of who did what when. This completely changes with smart contract-based profiles.
And may I know from Bill, because I mean, with the governance board you're working right now on the protocol and everything else, you are having a great experiment as well in inviting users to participate over there. How are they incentivized? And
yeah, we actually tried several different things in terms of incentivization, and we actually have some research. I don't think any official papers have come out, but research.web3.foundation, you can see some of the preliminary stuff of providing NFTs to people. Just people like to collect them. Not for financial gain. They're not trading them. They like these POAP. Just proof of voting, I guess, NFTs that they voted on different referenda. And what we've seen is, a lot of people like that. A lot of people like being seen as experts in something or in particular fields. So we allow people to delegate their votes to them. And people like that. This is, incentivization, but it's not airdrop farming. It's not just wanting to get tokens for doing something. Because we see these like social incentivization is often much stronger than the financial incentivization.
And we need identifiability for that.
Yep.
And that has been lacking, because right now there's no identifiability. There's just gibberish addresses and ENS names that are constantly switching. When we have that persistent blockchain-based profile or account that has your face, that can really act and do all of these votings, people will start to really care about them. And they will care about long-term, because they gain reputation, they gain maybe badges, and they interact, and people start to recognize them, and they know this is this guy, he's always doing this and this, and participating here and there. And that's when these very interesting new social protocols can be developed. And here we can experiment with all kinds of interesting systems, for example, where you have some people who act and others who watch the action or confirm the action or vote if something was done or not. And when we get these protocols, real social change is going to happen. And that's actually the thing I'm looking forward to seeing.
Yeah. Just real quick, Polkadot actually has several different identification schemes. So we do see this already as people go from network to network, but they keep their identity, and you can see this person has interacted with other things on chain. Sorry, I'm wearing the shirt. I have to bring it in.
Different identity approaches that have arisen in the community over the years to address some of these issues as you raised.
That's possibly the last challenge, right? To find the one standard after already having 50.
Yeah,
and
we have it.
Yeah?
We have it.
The 51
We fixed it.
standard. Awesome.
It's done. It's literally done. Sounds bold, but it's true. It's going to be true.
We will move on the disagreement to the VIP area, most likely. And I thank you so much for this conversation. I thank you, the audience, also joining us here on stage for, I believe, this was the highlight well, not today, but most likely of the whole conference. And
well, there was a challenge ahead of time that we shouldn't be like chickens in a line. So I think we're going to call ourselves a chicken chain gang after this.
Chicken official
just
There
to
needs
trigger
to be
my
a debate versus people just going down the line.
all right,
talking.
thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yes, please help me thank Eric, Fabian, Bill, Piers, and Sophia. Yeah?